the elitist, the man who says, who deserves to be first, the man who loves beautiful but useless things, who won't run because nothing is important enough, who gets honor but who despises it. You know, and his true goal is honor, which seems to us wrong, you know, but that's what produces a certain kind of grand grand ambition and hence grand activity of the virtues. See, when we say morality, we usually mean things that are accessible to all people, what every decent man can have, and that's fundamentally courage, moderation, perhaps, you know, willingness of charity as opposed to liberality. You know, those would be the virtues that most people say because they're accessible to all. But Aristotle would say, take a man like Alcibiades, who was a rascal, and then take an ordinary decent man. Which do you prefer? Now, I think we all formulaically say we prefer the ordinary decent man, but I don't believe it. Alcibiades is a rascal, but he shows certain human powers that just can't help but admire. Those human powers tamed and given, you know, a proper direction seem to be part of human perfection too, and that's what the proud man is. It's taken seriously, you know, the phenomena that motivates a certain kind of man who we find dangerous. And you can say the biblical tradition finds him dangerous, but also the moderns picking that up from a very different point of view from the Bible, you know, because these men start wars. These men insist upon being honored, which means to say they'll fight those who don't honor them. And there are a couple of little things, problems about the proud man. In a way, this seems to be the peak of the moral life. But in the first place, he seeks for honor, but in a way he despises it. So the very end, you can see it has something empty about it. You can see that beautifully characterized in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Caesar, who's conquered the world, is bored. It really isn't an end that's just in itself satisfying. And the second thing, and the more interesting one from this point of view, is he has a tendency to remember the benefits he has done and to forget the benefits he has received. This is what, if you go to ask Zeus for a favor, you say to him, now, you don't say to him, well, I did this and this for you, and you owe it back to me. You say, Zeus, you did this for me, you did this for me, now do this for me. But you see, there's a certain form of injustice implied in that, because you forget benefits given. Since the character of the proud man is to show his independence of necessity. He can play the role of the god. So, Book 5 on justice, it turns out, you see, there are two peaks of the moral life. Justice, which has to do with doing good for others and remembering benefits and paying them back. I won't say anything more than that. And magnificence, or, no, not magnificence, excuse me, pride, I would call it, greatness of soul. Pride, which forgets benefits, which takes oneself seriously, which is self-oriented. And those two are slightly different things. And you can say that two great traditions of morality, of moral problem, are represented in these first 5 books. One is the simple virtues of ordinary goodness and the heroic virtues, or the grand virtues. And the other is magnanimity versus justice. And you can say the moderns tried to simplify that in various ways, usually by choosing goodness and forgetting the heroic virtues in that opposition, and on the other, like Hobbes, choosing justice, or like Descartes choosing magnanimity, but mostly justice, and justice meaning, you know, the social virtues, as opposed to the virtues of self-perfection. But for Aristotle, those two are at a tension, you see. It is a presentation of the whole of the moral phenomenon. Now, Book 6, I obviously have to rush through. Yeah. It's amazing about Aristotle. I thought I didn't remember a thing, and I don't remember very much, but it's taking me longer than I thought it would. Book 6 deals with the natural extension. Well, you have to have the virtues. Well, the virtues are nature. You have to have the proper nature for it, habit. But then you have to have the principle of choosing. So you have to discuss prudence. But as soon as you discuss prudence, you're in the intellectual sphere. And when you're in the intellectual sphere, you have to realize that there are two virtues, prudence, two intellectual virtues, prudence and wisdom, which deal with different things. Aristotle makes a fundamental distinction: the prudence which calculates towards the ends, and wisdom which understands nature and the whole of things. And you see, Aristotle's whole moral philosophy, you can see, somewhat stands on the fact that there is a separation between prudence and wisdom, that the moral life has an independence, a certain independence, at least from the theoretical life. That's one side of it. Second place, that there is prudence, that there isn't a simple moralism, obey the commandment simply. Every moral rule, I believe, in Aristotle can be broken somehow in the name of prudence. There are no single and simple rules like the Ten Commandments. But that suddenly brings you out into a new world, which is beyond the moral world, when he suddenly tells you that it deals with the things that are always. Prudence deals with man, and man is not the highest thing, that there are things above man. But of course man can know those things, and so that's part of man. But in a way, you don't talk much about that in this context. And suddenly at the beginning of Book 7 he says, let's have a fresh beginning. And it's no longer virtue and vice only, but it's virtue and vice, self-control and lack of self-control, and heroic virtue and bestiality. Suddenly the presence of theoretical life expands and complicates the moral world. He talks about that only passingly, but it's very important to see that. And then a discussion of pleasure and a defense of pleasure. And then the two books on friendship, and then another discussion of pleasure. Isn't that beautiful? You see, friendship surrounded by pleasure. See, the moral virtues had to do with duty, a certain kind of effort. Friendship is pleasure. It doesn't require effort and is superior to justice. There can't be claims of justice among friends. Friendship is the goal of political life, but political life really isn't the same as friendship. And it's somehow superior to the moral life. But the moral life is necessary to friendship. But also, you will see, true friendship also requires a theoretical life, because what have men really got in common? Somebody said at lunch today, they don't have my toothache. I believe it was Father Flanagan did not have my toothache, and therefore was able to take it with a kind of ease. The ease of science, yeah. But Father, and he could never have my toothache, nor I his. But what we can have is we can have the same vision of things, the same understanding. It's the only thing men really have in common. When you and I are concentrating on the same problem in mathematics and understanding that we're one, even if, two people, today, the only form of community is making love, but of course, if the two people are having their own pleasures, this is the only community, and that's really ultimately the only basis of friendship. So the discussion of friendship provides a link between the moral life and the theoretical life. And it is a basis on which the ordinary gentleman can understand something of the theoretical life, transcends ordinary morality. There's a gentleness and so on about friendship. Now, that passage on friendship should be read with the greatest of care with them, and the greatest, because it really is, it shows how reasonable Aristotle is, and the peak of it, I just want to read you, the passage I find most moving, and it doesn't really mean much if you... Well, there are two passages. which are the peak, and doesn't mean much, but you have to lead them up to a peak, and it has to be a crescendo, and it can be very, very exciting, because and also it's the only way to come to this. I mean, it should be led to this peak by the way, the three kinds of friendships which they can understand, and so on. But then he talks about why men prefer doing benefits than receiving them. This is just this is not the peak passage. This is 9.6, but or 9.7.